The pandemic has completely altered the way we work. The way we work, how workplaces are designed, everything has changed. Remote working, hybrid working are the new normal that we're looking at. Future of work is a topic which people have been talking about for a while now, but I think the prominence and the various aspects related to future of work is become more important now than ever before. From Amoeboids, we've set up the Upraise Research Council with the core focus of studying on how the future of work is going to be, what are some trends which are going to emerge out of that, and how should organizations be ready for it. So we have brought in professors and faculty from Ivy League universities, spoken to HR leaders, coaches out there to get their perspectives on what the future of work is going to look like. We are really excited to release our first report around this study, and our charter is, as we move forward, we will be having a lot more of these research reports that we will be publishing and continuing this conversation with HR leaders as we shape the future of work. So I have an eminent panel with me here today. I have Renu Bohra. She's the CHRO of DB Schenker for India and the subcontinent. It's one of the leading supply chain centric organizations. I have Professor Robyn Catagnus, who's with us. She's an eminent behavioral psychologist and professor at Chicago School of Psychology. I have Giridhar GV with me. He's the Executive Vice President for Global Talent at HGS, and Anand Inamdar, who is the CEO of Amoeboids. And my name is Karthik Nagendra, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Amoeboids. So I would like to welcome all the panelists once again, and really excited to have this conversation with you. So before I start off, I would like to share some of the interesting findings that we've got from our survey report. So we've basically broken it down into 4 buckets. One, from a culture perspective. Second is more with respect to the behavioral aspect. Third is with respect to performance management of employees. And fourth, with respect to leadership. So during the course of this panel discussion, we will be focusing on some of the aspects across these 4 buckets. So to begin with, let's look at culture as an aspect. So some very interesting insights that we got from our report was that 62% of organizations claim to have reworked on their policies to meet the requirement of this new normal, which is either a remote work or hybrid work. Technology-based solutions facilitate seamless working in 21% of the organizations. 100% of the respondents were positive about their focus on talent development, and over 88% of them are looking at improving work-life balance. So these were some very interesting data points which we got with respect to culture. So my first question to Renu would be, what are some of the most must-have policy changes that are required for a hybrid work environment that organizations need to focus upon?
Thank you. Before I speak, I would like to say that I'm quite happy to be here on this topic, and this panel is quite august panel, so happy to be here. And thanks, Amoeboids, for inviting me.
Thank you.
Future of work is not a new topic. I would say this topic has been there raging for the last few years, but it has taken prominence during the pandemic time. And I would like to quote Murakami here, the saying that, and once the storm is over, you won't remember, how you survived, or even the storm is over, or it's still continuing. But one thing is certain, that when you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person as you entered in the storm. So I think what we should realize is that even if the pandemic second wave or third wave is still ongoing, and we have some more waves, things have changed a lot. I'm finding that, organizations are talking about going back to normal, as if everything can be just, forgotten about, and no new learnings have happened, and we'll just go back to what we were doing 2 years back. And this is where I think we should stop and acknowledge that things should change. The future of work already has changed.
Yeah.
In the sense that the workplace has changed. The employee behavior has changed.
Yeah.
We're talking about hybrid working. We also talked about working from anywhere. We spoke about remote working. Yeah. We talked about distributed workforce. So it is not the employees who are located in an area are now working from home. They are now distributed everywhere. And this is not only for technology companies. So organizations have to decide, what roles can be mapped and put to such kind of remote working or hybrid working. And I'm sure that there are many roles. And those roles who cannot be, I think, have to be enabled. Because at the end of the day, we talk about fairness. Why would we prefer to have a hybrid model? Because it provides flexibility. It provides the work from home. We know that it's not a vacation time and you are working from home, but it definitely, for people living in metro cities, it provides you certain leeway to balance your life. So what policies would change and need to be immediately changed or have to be relooked? I would say, first of all, the workplace definition has to be relooked, and it has to be accepted that for the distributed workforce, we have to agree that hybrid working and home as a workplace has to be acknowledged, which also means that from HR point of view, are we open to relook at what is discipline, employee discipline? What do you mean by employee attendance and absenteeism? And when we talk about work assignment, then what does it mean? And so we talk about OKR more than just job description. Performance management has to also be relooked, and I think it's high time that we see it from a very broad angle. And besides these policies, I think practices around employee engagement, employee communication, and involvement have to be relooked at. When everybody was under the same workplace, what is employee communication? And when they are all distributed, how do you ensure that employees are communicated and there is a two-way communication ongoing at the real time, which is an important aspect of culture, has to be ensured. Even the role of manager has to be relooked when we talk about this new workplace and the future of work. It cannot be just, what it was there 2 years back. And I think the practice around celebration or fun at workplace has to also be given its due importance. We know that people are distributed all across, and fun is what binds them together. Culture is what binds them together, and values. So how do you walk the talk, and how do you ensure this, all these in a new workplace?
So you very nicely touched upon various aspects from a policy standpoint that we need to look into, right? From what is the definition of workplace itself? So I think it's as good as going back to the drawing board and re-looking everything under a new lens. So that's very interesting. So my next question, I would like Giri to share some experiences on this front. Because of the pandemic, we suddenly had remote work which had to happen overnight. While some organizations were doing remote working, but it was still not the norm. And the pandemic and the lockdowns meant that overnight everybody had to work from home. So that's where leveraging technology becomes a very crucial aspect. So what are some ways organizations can leverage technology for seamless working or collaboration? and what role can the HR leaders play in that? Maybe if you can share some examples of how you at HGS went about doing this.
Hi, Karthik. Thanks for having me. Simple thing, like when you hire a new set of people, it is almost mandatory for them to be in a classroom to go through training.
Correct.
But here we couldn't do that at all, right? So we had to create almost overnight create training programs that could be delivered virtually, using tools that can be done virtually, and obviously I think in this last 1 year itself, even some of these platforms have improved so much that all that helped. I think our own team's ability to quickly figure a way to do things, whether it's training on joining, how do you keep in touch with employees, especially our HR folks were literally, I would say, almost overdoing in terms of being in touch with employees, making a number of calls. In fact, a new metric got created in terms of the number of calls an HR person is making in a given day to different people, just to check what's going on. And mind you, all this was happening in an environment where people are worried about what's happening to themselves and their families.
Yes.
Right? So one was work, another thing was the employee well-being.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people were already struggling with family members having COVID, and not everybody has enough infrastructure at home to be, So I think a lot of employees also perhaps struggled through this whole journey of somebody probably sick at home, at the same time they need a proper place to sit and log in and do the work. So we constantly kept in touch with employees, started doing more online surveys just to get a pulse check of how people are feeling, well-being surveys, right? And being in touch with. So that was all on the softer side. And then, the whole, knowledge transfer, training, creating modules on the systems to be able to ensure that a new hire is actually fully trained to be put in front of the customer.
Okay.
So I think almost
multiple areas.
Multiple areas, like simple thing, like as simple as it sounds. While we all talk of a lot of automation, some of these small processes, like an employee joining formalities, were never designed to be done virtually.
Yes.
Right? There are forms that you fill in, and there are things that you do, which used to be the way of working.
Correct.
But overnight, everything had to be changed. Everything had to be changed into a place where people will actually go fill up Excel sheets. It started that way, then there was further improvement on that. And I think it also created a lot of opportunities for us to innovate. Recruiting, right? Today, opportunity in crisis, or innovation in crisis. Today, we have actually developed our own internal digital team has developed a bot that is used exclusively for recruiting. And it has actually transformed how we source and hire people. And we had huge challenges in the US. And this bot, for example, which was developed in 8 weeks from concept to actually going live, happened because of this crisis.
Yeah, so that was very interesting, and also that you created your own app, and within a short span of 8 weeks to engage those employees. I think that's a very beautiful example of how, as HR leaders, you can still be at the forefront and create that kind of employee experience in itself. So we looked at an aspect both from the HR leaders' perspective. So now I would like to go to Professor Robyn. Professor, what aspects should organizations keep in mind to support mental well-being of employees in this workplace? Because we've seen that during the pandemic, there was so much of stress, anxiety among employees, and that's going to continue even when you have the remote working that's happening. Right. So what do you think organizations need to be doing on that front?
Well, first, I want to say thank you very much for even bringing this important topic forward. These issues are not new in the workplace. I think all of us have experienced stress and overwhelm, and a lot of our workplace cultures, whether it's stated or implicit, really reinforce overwork, overwhelm, sometimes cognitive overwhelm, sometimes physical, working past our limits. The pandemic and the future are just going to continue to highlight these issues and make them more prevalent. And the conversation is really changing around this. People are starting to discuss mental health in the workplace. People are more willing to say, I'm not coping well, I'm struggling. And there's conversations we can have with our managers and our leaders and changes we can make in the workplace that facilitate not only the conversation, but sustainable, actionable steps, going beyond offering, a little bit of time off or saying, hey, we have counseling available, but truly modeling practices that prevent burnout, modeling compassion, modeling practices that are inclusive. There's a very deep connection between inclusivity and mental health. And, we've been talking a lot about DEI in the last few years, and all of these issues relate together. And, we talk about workplace culture, but culture is not only the things that we write and the policies we create, but the behaviors that we engage in, what we model, what we reinforce, what we put into our coaching, how we recognize people and how we include them. So I think ultimately where this becomes a sticking point for some organizations is there's still a little bit of a belief that the harder people work, the more will get done, the higher revenue will be, we'll hit those key metrics. But in reality, smart working, healthy working has been shown time and again to be the most effective way to be productive and to retain people. Very important, so they don't burn out, they don't leave your organization. There's so many benefits, and that we're just starting to come to the conversation and say, hey, sometimes working less is smarter. Sometimes taking a break is smarter. Not being interrupted is smarter. And I think we're going to continue to have that conversation as we move forward into the future.
Yeah. So I think for the very first time, mental wellness has become more mainstream now. So organizations are also realizing that, and there are a lot more conversations which are happening on that front. So continuing further from there, the next aspect which I would like to touch upon would be, how do you keep employees motivated in this future workplace? So we had some very interesting insights again from our study, which showed that over 65% believe that OKRs, like Renu mentioned, that tie up with the employee goals and corporate strategy can actually motivate employees to perform better. Feeling differentiated for working remotely is one of the highest concern for employees, with over 75% of them saying that's a concern for us on how we will be rated when we are working remotely. And over 60% HR leaders consider coaching and feedback to be vital for the overall employee performance. So here I would like to call upon Anand. So Anand, how can organizations better leverage OKRs for employee success and accelerate growth for the business?
Right. Very insightful findings from that survey, Karthik. And very interesting question as well. One of the things that I have realized time and again when I go out for OKR coaching is that OKRs typically, at least at the moment, tend to be looked at as a craze of the times, fad of the times.
Yeah.
Really, the bottom line we are talking about here is focus. So one exercise that I always conduct in my OKR workshops is I ensure that all of the department heads, along with the VPs and executive team, sit together, right? Each one of them has a piece of paper, and I ask them a single question. The question is, what's the topmost priority for the organization in the ongoing quarter, right?
Okay.
Everybody has to write their own answers in the paper, and then after a couple of minutes of time, each one will stand up and talk about their point of view. Now, this reveals a very, key gap between understandings of different departments, different people, different locations as well, right? So what some of them are too broad. They basically talk about the priority is increasing revenue. I mean, that's universally true for almost all profitable organizations, right?
Yes.
Then some of them are too parochial in their views, too narrow-minded, and they're thinking about, getting a CHRO on board to ensure that we have growth in terms of size and so on. So that just goes on to show the lack of focus the lack of direction as far as the entire team is concerned. I mean, all of them are pretty true in terms of what they are saying, but that's not really the topmost priority for the organization. These are the small things, small initiatives that they are working on. Right? So given now, this was important, the focus was important even before. That hasn't changed. In fact, that has been amplified due to the fact that now everyone is working asynchronously.
Yeah.
Right. So that word is important, asynchronously. Earlier, at least you used to have the physical co-location so that there would be discussion surrounding what your team is doing, what my team is doing, how we can collaborate, how we can achieve so and so goal. But now, since everyone is working asynchronously, I think from a technology point of view, it's high time that technology stood up and said, here I am to help you out, plug these gaps in terms of understandings. Now that not only applies to the department heads or executives, you can do the exact same exercise by getting all of the team members from one single team into a conference room. Just change the question slightly and ask them, what is our team's highest priority for this quarter? You'll find the same thing. Everyone will end up with different answers, right? So that is the reason I think, be it OKRs, be it balanced scorecard, be it management by objectives, you have to design a way for individuals, for teams, for groups to be aligned with the organizational goals, to the organizational initiatives. And that is where OKRs and the other frameworks do come in.
That's very interesting, because as part of this study, when I was talking to some of the OKR coaches as well, some of them brought up saying, a lot of organizations are jumping onto OKRs because of FOMO, right? So they said they were talking about, how you should actually evaluate and take it up in the right way. It is not just that because somebody is doing it, I should also jump onto the OKR bandwagon. So that's very interesting. So my next question would be to Professor Robyn. So from a behavioral aspect, if you look at, because change of work styles to remote or hybrid also requires a lot of behavioral changes which are needed from the employee standpoint as well. And like I mentioned, there is also this concern that will I be treated differently, or will there be bias because my colleague is probably working in office, whereas I am working remotely. So how do you think organizations can connect the behavioral change initiatives to the purpose of an organization so that everybody is aligned and there is a seamless work environment that's established?
So this is really neat, because the way that we value our work also ties back to everything we're talking about. So when we feel the work that we're doing is important and we're making a contribution to not only our company and team, but to some aspect that we value in the world, doing good in the world, doing good for our clients, work is easier and better. So when you're really clear in your organization about why you do the work that you do at the highest level, and you have a really crystalline vision of how your work impacts somebody in the world, employees appreciate that, because then the work becomes meaningful. And so when you tie all of your behavior change goals back to your values and to the mission of your company, it helps create an alignment that helps people understand the rationale, the why of the behavior change. It helps create buy-in. And when you know what you're ultimately working for, you can set those intermediate goals for change and tie it all together. And that sense of meaning in the survey that you shared with us, meaning was really important. People want to be somewhere that they not only feel valued and appreciated, but that the work they're doing is good work in the world. And so pulling all those pieces together can help. And then, of course, it ties back to performance management and coaching as well, because when all of these aspects are aligned and we're coaching toward our intermediate goals that align with all of our values that we share, and we all have slightly different values, right? But there's some core things we can align around. So I think that's one way that having a strong mission and having everybody understand it and tying it to each thing that we do can help across culture, behavior, and our evaluation systems.
And I think that's all the more important for the Gen Z that's entering into the workforce. Because in fact, I was reading a study which said that about 45% of them who were surveyed said that they would actually switch over from a brand if they didn't believe, that the brand was actually contributing some value to the society. So I think that also applies to the workplace as well, with respect to being connected to the purpose and value of the organization. So Renu, I wanted to touch upon from the coaching aspect, which Professor Robyn just brought about. So how can organizations make coaching an integral part of the overall talent development itself, and how can HR leaders drive that change?
Okay, it's a good question in the sense that why we're talking about coaching.
Yeah.
The reason we're talking about coaching is that we would like, in the future of work, we believe that skills will become quite redundant very fast. Say, if X million jobs will be lost, there will be X million jobs will be open up, but they won't be the same as the one that got lost, and they won't have the same skill sets required. So we talk about being future ready, and I think that's the reason we're talking about coaching from the organization perspective. But when we talk about future ready, I'm reminded of one incident when I was watching one video of Professor Harari on future of work. He was saying that skills will be what is being taught in the schools today will not be even required after 20 years. So the students, the graduates will come out, they may not be able to use those skills at all in the employment market. And then I saw a comment from a viewer that, and so the professor said that we need to reskill, keep on reskilling. And there was a question that while somebody reskills, how will he or she sustain?
Yeah.
When, and I think there is the job of the organization. And the organization, and we know that the learning and development model is 10, 20, 70, where 10 is more of a classroom setting, where you learn in a classroom session. 20 is around developmental relationships.
Yeah.
And there we talk about mentoring, we talk about coaching, we talk about networking, we talk about developmental feedback.
True.
Many things can be learned in the organization through developmental feedback. And I think it is not so easy. While we say feedback, how many of us have been skilled to give a helpful feedback?
Yeah.
Half the time we are so critical.
Correct.
And when we are critical, we've lost the game already.
Yeah.
Because then your defense mechanisms are already out. So as an organization, I think it's the organization's responsibility to ensure that its employees are future ready. Now you will say, what is the business sense of it? We all know about it. There is a strong business sense because that will create a differentiation.
Yeah.
It is not that the employee is totally redundant in a span of 1 or 2 years, but he or she has to immediately learn a new skill, which the person should have agility. But a lot of agility also comes from an attitude towards learning.
Correct.
So there is, in that space, managers play a very important role. As a coach, as a mentor, to support their team members. Now, how does organization build this culture of coaching? I think I can talk about my own organization, that we run certification program for mentoring managers. To say for making managers as mentors. There are organizations which put a lot of focus on making managers as coaches or certifying them as coaches. I think all these help a lot, because then you know your role of manager is not just to supervise or to performance manage, but rather your role is to coach and give helpful feedback so that the organization thrives.
True. So that's very right, and in fact, I think in Harari's book 21st century challenges and 21 answers, 21 lessons for 21st century challenges. He in fact highlights this point of saying reskilling. How is it going to become all the more crucial? And I think it's about having that growth mindset which will be required. And like you rightly pointed, the role of the managers also should actually evolve. In fact, as part of this study, we were talking to the HR head of Biocom, and even he was mentioning that, in fact, managers could become redundant if they don't start adopting a coaching-led mindset. So that's very interesting insights.
We're very far from there because we still see managers who are very at times toxic.
True. In fact, I'm an ICF certified coach myself, so I work closely with a lot of these managers, and you're very right. We still have a long way to go on that front. So moving forward with respect to performance management. Now that's again a very crucial point which you also brought it up. When we were talking about it. So we had some interesting insights on that aspect as well. Where over 45% of respondents, the HR leaders, have said that their performance management process has completely changed to meet this new normal. So it's kind of evolved. Over 40% of them believe it's important to align the current performance management systems with OKRs of the organization. So again, the focus on OKR has come in. While very interestingly, coaching in organizations again is still very nascent, with only about 11 to 12% of them saying that coaching is still being used, or coaching is being used in their organizations as part of the performance management itself. So my question is to Giri. So Giri, what changes do you think performance management should go through, or what changes do you foresee in organizations with respect to performance management?
I think having clear metrics, clear objectives, articulated as always. I wouldn't say that was never there before. I think even more so in this current environment becomes important. Using appropriate, technology platforms to be able to actually monitor performance real time becomes an important element, especially in a virtual environment. For example, in our organization, we've just started implementing, we're kind of halfway through implementing a particular tool for all our frontline staff, which incidentally is about 70% of our organization approximately, where the tool actually helps them to monitor where they are. They themselves can see where they are on a daily basis in terms of their basic metrics of their performance. And it also helps their supervisors to be able to appropriately coach people on a given thing. It almost gives you data saying, okay, person X needs to be coached on these two things. So that their performance can go up if they're kind of, let's say, struggling with those metrics. So some kind of a real-time data support where you have a lot of frontline employees and you have day-to-day metrics to follow. I think using technology platforms will certainly help, and we are on that journey. I think I would say even for the mid-level and above, having more, I would say having more feedback, frequency of conversations around performance, which I think many of the tools today provide opportunity, where you're not waiting for the end of the year to have a conversation in terms of what you did, because that's kind of dated if you ask me.
Yes.
Right? I think having more frequent conversations, keeping performance conversations more day-to-day stuff becomes, and that's why I'm kind of, having worked for more than 30 years, I personally don't like the word performance appraisal. It almost kind of, it doesn't really convey the real core reason for why you actually do that at the end of the year. To me, performance, I would like it to be called more as performance conversations, right?
Interesting.
Yes, comes to work for charity. There's a business, and everyone needs to perform to be able to deliver to our clients and customers. But but we're dealing with humans, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a machine to say that, okay, how is it performing, right? It's not an automobile saying how is it performing, is it giving you the mileage, is it giving you, so it's not a machine. Here we're talking about people.
Correct.
So when it comes to people, it has to be more, if you need to really engage people from their hearts, it has to be performance conversations. So any system that can provide opportunities for having more conversations, a system which helps you get more frequent feedback from your users, from your customers, from your clients, so that your conversations are more in terms of making corrective actions or more developmental conversations, more constructive. I think that becomes even more important. I always believe that that's the way performance management should be done.
Correct.
But even more so in a virtual environment and in hybrid kind of working environments, having those conversations which are constructive and tools that can help in having these conversations, which is data based rather than perceptions.
Correct.
Will help. Let's say if you're my manager and you want to have a conversation with me of how things are going on. Imagine you just sitting and having a conversation without necessarily having all the data, whereas you just probably got one appreciation from a client or one complaint from a client, and you're just using that as a lens to see me.
Correct.
Versus where you actually have a data, right? You actually have trends. You know how it's like today, everything is like you buy something on Amazon, they'll ask you for a feedback. Right? Today, it's data-rich world that we're working with.
Yeah.
Can we create platforms where we make it data-rich even for having conversations with employees? So same manager, you talking to me with saying, hey, you know what? In the last 6 months, I see that your sales trend, or how your pipeline is looking. Let's say if I was a sales guy, or if I'm, uh, a production guy, how your performance, what you've done in terms of your contribution looks like this. So what's really good? What are some of the things that you can probably do to get even better? What is I want as an individual, based on this feedback? I think to have those conversations, anything that any data can kind of really help you real time. I think those are the ways where an employee doesn't feel just because I'm not actually in front of my supervisor or manager, I'm not losing out anything. Or just because I'm actually not, my supervisor is actually not watching me. I'm working really hard. I'm working like 10 hours a day. But you know what? I don't even know if my supervisor actually knows that I'm working hard.
Yeah. So true. In fact, I like that word that you said, that it's not performance appraisal. It's not a machine that you're evaluating, but it should be performance conversations. So that's very interesting way of looking at performance management itself. Anand, we spoke about OKRs, right? And at Amoeboids, with our appraise suite, we've also worked with a lot of organizations with respect to helping them implement OKRs better and gain business advantages of that. So how can organizations align OKRs with their current performance management systems better? So can you share some examples around that?
I mean, this is a question that we almost get always, right? Especially for mid-size organizations and startups. Anything between 10 to 500 people, there would be some HR folks that would come in and say, how do I now ensure that the performance management of employees is based on the OKRs that they are working on? And I mean, I would hate to say it, but unfortunately, there is no single and right answer to it.
No.
OKRs are still being adopted across different industries, across different organizations, across different cultures, and there are different flavors of it, right? Each organization takes in OKRs, but adds some kind of flavor that's very peculiar to the team, to the company values. Now, having said that, there are going to be two thought processes, two opinions about it. There is one school of thought that says definitely not. OKRs should not be related to the performance management at all. And the other school of thought says it's okay, you can have some part of performance management relying upon the OKRs that the individuals are working on. like I said, there is no easy way out. You have to experiment. One of the most important things, I think, was just one of the panelists said, it's not about performance appraisal, it's about performance management. Typically, what happens is people look at performance management as performance appraisal, which I think is extensively wrong, because appraisals are typically backward looking. You're trying to figure out what happened right, what happened wrong. But the management aspect of it should really include, obviously it's going to include performance appraisal, but some part of it also should cater to coaching and performance planning that is forward looking, right? And the feedback should really happen in the time. Now, coming back to the original question that you had asked, how do organizations adopt OKRs? Now, there are a couple of examples from our own experience when we implemented OKRs in different levels of organizations. One company decided they did not want to tie the OKRs with performance management at the individual level at all.
Okay.
How did they go about it? They completely removed the individual level objectives. They decided that in this agile world, it's all about team. So you create the top level corporate objectives and support them via those group level objectives, be it department level, team level, and so on. But there will not be any individual objectives. That's one take. Again, there is no right or wrong. That's just one example. The other organization, what they did was they implemented OKRs at all the three levels: corporate level, group level, and the individual level. And then they decided that some part of the individual OKRs will be counted in the performance appraisal process, right? Now, when I say performance appraisal, again, the OKRs themselves are a part of the entire performance management process.
Correct.
At the individual level, you are creating them in a forward-looking manner. For example, it could be related to reskilling, it could be upskilling, it could be anything about individual improving in their careers, moving ahead in their careers. So the organization, like I said, gave a certain weightage to the execution of individual OKRs as a part of the entire performance management process.
Okay. So very interesting. So there's no one size fits all kind of an approach. So each one has to be taken on a case-to-case basis, and I think that's where experts also come into play, where they will evaluate the scenario which is there, and then probably suggest what's the best way to implement.
And this is not only true at the company level. In fact, within a company itself, there could be multiple departments which behave differently, right? So maybe sales department is too much, say, quota driven or numbers driven. In that case, it definitely makes sense to have some kind of association between your individual OKRs and the performance management. But there could be, say, software development team, which is not necessarily interested in doing that. So it has to be taken into account after you consider all the cultural differences.
So various aspects to keep in mind before you implement that. So that was very interesting. So we spoke about the culture aspect. We spoke about behavior of employees. We spoke about performance management. The other crucial area which I want to focus on is from a leadership standpoint. And our survey showed that over 65% of the younger generation wants more transparency from the leaders in their organization. And over 60% of them want coaching, mentoring, and ongoing feedback for the jobs that they're doing. So, Professor Robyn, how can leaders be coached to be future ready? How can they develop this kind of a mindset where they are ready to operate in this future workplace?
So I think, it's always fun to tie organizational efforts back to behavioral science, because all the things we're talking about are behaviors, the things that we do that impact the world. And I think when you're considering how to coach current leaders or future leaders, it's important to realize that the skill set they need as leaders and inspirers is different than the skills that they had to get to the point of being promoted into bigger, broader leadership roles.
True.
It's not enough anymore to know everything about your unit and to hit every metric. You have to be thinking about more agility, right? Wisdom, judgment, how to inspire people. So I think as we're coaching, of course, we want to use best practices in coaching. We want to be having a growth mindset. We want to be able to talk about failure. We want to have a positive approach to coaching, and so people feel appreciated and we're shaping the behavior we want. But our leaders need to be doing something different. They need to be really owning what's happening in the company. They need to be motivating people, tying everything together, helping people understand the why of their work. So step one is to think about your organization and really think what's different about what leaders need to do. And I'd like to tie all that back to mental health. We also need to be able to be vulnerable about these issues for the people that they're leading. They need to be great models. They need to take care of themselves so that they don't burn out and so they can continue the good work that they're doing. So I think the other piece is sometimes our leaders forget to be good coaches. Once they get into that role, the pressures are very different. So keeping that culture of ongoing feedback that's bi-directional, that ties back to that need for transparency, for regular contact with our supervisors, for feeling our leaders are trustworthy, and that they are making decisions that tie back to the things we care about.
True. Very interesting. So, Renu, how can organizations create a growth environment, one which provides support systems to make the employees future ready? So maybe from your experience and what you're doing in your organization, if you could share some best practices which organizations can look into.
I think organizations have a big role to play in making the employees future ready, and they have to provide their support. And I would like to just, when I give a response to this question, I would like to think of the famous parable of, who moved my cheese, wherein there was some set of mice who says that, how can they move our cheese? The cheese has to be here, and they kept on waiting for the cheese. And there were others who kept on moving to new stations, cheese stations, to look for cheese. So I think what organization can do, the first and foremost thing is to create a culture of acceptance of change. Are we so rigid in the organization that we indirectly reward people for working for very long years in the same role? Or are we building a culture where if you swiftly move from one role to another role, you are rewarded in terms of promotion, in terms of growth, in terms of higher salary? And when people would like to apply for various internal job posting, and if they fail in their new role, do you give them that support that they can go back to the previous role or to a new role, another new role? We have cases where employees, we gave them one role, in 6 months they came back to us that it is not going well. One case was just to put them under PIP and release them, but then we again tried them in another role and then another role. So we have this mindset of trying people in various roles, because so that people see the success stories of others who switch on to different roles and they don't hold to some roles. What we had found in an organization where I had worked, that there were HODs, the head of departments, and they were there for 10-12 years, same HOD. So you're locking the growth of the team members, and you're also creating a kind of fiefdom, or where you would like to just secure your knowledge and not share the knowledge, so that you are indispensable. So that culture of change and acceptance of change is what organization should drive. As a good practice, we also run various certification programs in the organization, so that people get certified, learn new skills. Very similar to the defense forces, where in the defense forces, while you have short service commission or you have early retirement, but they make you they give you a lot of certification opportunities so that you are employable. So I think that is what organizations can do. I think one thing that we have to learn is that at times we force employees to take up new certification, to take up new trainings, but we don't give them time off from their work. So you have your regular day job, and then you have those learning courses, and then you're just pushing them
Correct.
So that is where I think we have to look, and that is the kind of support the organization can give to people who are learning and trying a new skill. Here, I would like to talk about what Professor Robyn was talking about is a lot on resilience. And I think organization should build resilience and focus on resilience of employees in the sense of be it physical resilience. For example, we tied up with a health app and we ran a 84-day challenge in the organization. Though 30% people participated, but I think it was a good participation. And if the senior guys are also participating, it is walk the talk. It is like you're creating an example that physical resilience, physical fitness is so important.
True.
Same goes with financial resilience. And in the pandemic time, we have found that there were very sad cases of people who suddenly were not there, and their families suffered because of no financial support. So I think the organization has a good role to play in making employees resilient, be it mental resilience or physical or emotional or social resilience.
So true. So I think net the learnings which we get from here is that change is the only constant. Whether it's the organization, whether it's leaders, managers, employees, what you need is a growth mindset. What you need is resilience, which is needed to be future ready. So the future of work. We are having these conversations here. A lot of us are also learning, unlearning, relearning as we move forward on this, because this is going to be a topic which is a lot more dynamic, and we will continue to have these conversations in due course as well. I would like to thank all our panelists once again for sharing those wonderful perspectives. I had so much to learn and had a takeaway from this panel discussion. Thank you once again to all our panelists.